vagrant. It's a bird that's strayed outside its normal range, strayed so far that it's forgotten how to find its way home. Most of them don't survive. Saying, Robbie, you could still go home.
Robbie's gone too far, and the chances of him surviving all this are coming close to being impossible. But if there's one thing certain, he's set on getting his revenge on Jason and killing him before it's all said and done. Welcome back. Today we are here to break down episode 5 of TAS titled Vagrants. In this episode, we finally get to see the meeting between Tom and Robbie. Meanwhile, Perry makes a decision that he regrets, and ladies and gentlemen, we officially meet the real leak within the task force. We've got so much to talk about in this episode. I'm so excited to be back with you all, so let's discuss it all and break it all down. Full spoilers ahead. The episode opens in a dream as we return to the quarry. This location, originally a symbol of innocence and tradition through Robbie and Billy's ritual, is now a flashpoint of pain and guilt, reminding Robbie of the celebration he shared with Peaches and the recently murdered Cliff. Waking up in anger, Robbie is looking for Ray, believing him to be the one who set them up. Instead, he finds Shelly, who delivers the news that Ray has been in jail for the last 2 days and that the FBI is now involved and they were the one that were texting Cliff. Now at this point, Robbie doesn't know that Cliff is dead. Shelly offers to help move the drugs, and her motivation being that she needs the money to help her escape Ray before he potentially posts bail. Robbie doesn't take her up on her offer as he leaves. For now, the Ray and Shelly storyline appears to be closed, but I am curious if we'll swing back to Shelly at the end and maybe Aaliyah helps her out in some capacity and find a new place to live far away from Ray. Now back with the task force, the investigation gains traction. They've identified Robbie's connect, Bartos, and are meeting with the witness, Alex, whom Robbie assaulted in last week's episode. Tom instructs Alex to be as meticulously detailed for the sketch artist, tightening the neck around Robbie's identity. Now, a small yet critical detail is planted here. Tom learns that Sam was not in distress. Alex recounts seeing Sam seamlessly normal releasing a fish. This detail is the first seed of doubt regarding Robbie's presumed inherent criminality. It suggests to Tom that this suspect, while dangerous, may not align with the typical profile of a violent offender, setting the stage for a potential shift in their future confrontation later in this episode. Now it's here that we get clarity on Caitlin's actions in last week's episode. A brief but significant scene confirms that the mysterious phone call that she made last week was not to a Dark Heart ally, but instead it was to a subordinate by the name of Connor requesting information on her task force members. Now remember what I said last week. What if that phone call she made was to someone in an department to investigate the team versus it being a Dark Heart person, and she was not the leak that the episode made her out to be? Now let's play devil's advocate. Kathleen could simply be calling her higher ups within the department about this potential leak and getting an internal investigation started. Now we'll talk about the reveal a little bit later, but as far as this scene goes, I don't foresee the show pulling a rug from underneath us yet again and showing the fact that she was maybe an additional mole or additional leak. So I'm convinced this scene confirmed that Kathleen is not and was not the leak. Instead, she was intelligently and discreetly investigating the internal corruption she suspected at play that was brought to her by Tom. Now, back at Jason and Aaron's house, after what I'm assuming they just got done burying Cliff's body, we see Detective Perry plants a tracker on Aaron's car. Meanwhile, inside, Aaron's attention fixes on the bloodstain on Jason's shirt. Now, I read this as a psychological trigger. The sight of her husband covered in blood likely serves as a grim echo, reminding her of the trauma associated with losing Billy at the hands of Jason. The blood kind of acts like a visceral link between Jason's past violence and his present actions. Now, at Robbie's, one of the episode's most tense sequences unfolds as we see Maeve and Sam having breakfast. Now, Sam's not ready to leave, despite saying that he was ready to go home in last week's episode. Now, as Sam goes outside to say goodbye to the chickens, Perry knocks on the front door and enters, and Maeve has to put on a poker face and not show just how shocked but also nervous she must be in this moment. Now we watch as Perry puts on this kind uncle act, and he makes up this story to why he's here. He says this is going to be a ceremony for the fallen brothers, including her dad, Billy. Now, just like in episode 2, we watch Maeve be quick on her feet. She has Perry go around back to get some of Billy's stuff to avoid him seeing Sam. Now, as Perry looks through Billy's belongings in the garage, it allows Maeve time needed to successfully hide Sam in the chicken coop. Now, I mentioned episode 2, and remembering how tense and anxious that moment was at the end of that episode, and here we're less than 10 minutes in, and I had a very similar feeling while watching Maeve navigate this situation. Now, back inside, Perry sees Maeve feeding the chickens, and things seem normal. Until he looks at the refrigerator and sees a picture of Cliff, who he just watched get murdered the night before, in a picture with Robbie. Now, this discovery is diffused when Perry's phone buzzes with a notification from the tracker showing Aaron is on the move. Now, Perry asks Maeve about Robbie's whereabouts, and she tells him that she hasn't seen him in a few days, and as he leaves, he kisses her on the forehead and tells her to remember that they're still family. Obviously, Aaron's movement detracts Perry's immediate focus, saving Maeve from more questioning for now. As he leaves, we watch Maeve catch her breath. I don't know which moment had me more stressed, episode 2 or this moment, but sticking with Maeve, we see her with Sam in the car as she meets with her friend from work who sees that she has Sam and she knows that she's going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, Maeve asks her friend to look after Robbie's kids as she tries to figure out what to do with Sam. Now, if Maeve's situation wasn't dire enough, we see the task force makes a major breakthrough. Aaliyah confirms that the second DNA sample pulled from the bucket that Sam used belongs to Maeve. Aaliyah further indicates Maeve as the daughter of Billy, a former lieutenant in the Dark Hearts. Now, as Leah is telling Tom this, he recalls the name Billy from Joe's past accounts, connecting the dots. Tom now understands that the line between the investigation and the world of the Dark Hearts are now colliding. We see the wheels are turning, and he is now off to confront Maeve. Now, I'm not sure if Tom recognized or realized or even remembers that he met Maeve back in episode 2, but based on this interaction, I don't think he remembers. Now, going back to Aaliyah telling Tom that information, we just learned that Billy was a lieutenant, which to me adds even more context to Jason killing him, because I would bet his rank meant that he was important, but also maybe he was considered to be untouchable. So if a lieutenant was murdered, I can now understand why some other members, like McShane, weren't on board with that decision. I also wonder if some of the members wish that Billy led the Dark Hearts and not Jason, potentially causing more conflict within the Dark Hearts. Now, back with Robbie, he meets up with Erin, who we know her car is being traced by Perry, who's headed their way without either one of them knowing. Now, at the quarry, Erin tells Robbie, who's still trying to figure out how the FBI are now involved, she tells him that Jason was covered in blood, and Robbie knows what that means. As we watch him start to cry, understanding that Cliff, his best friend and brother figure, is now dead. The raw emotion as Robbie breaks down, understanding that Jason has now taken not only his biological brother Billy, who he loved, but also the man considered his closest friend and also his brother, is just heartbreaking. Now, despite Erin's advice to holding off on moving the drugs, Robbie, fueled now by grief and desperate need for control, he has other plans. As he leaves Erin, setting a dangerous chain of events in motion. Now, I normally don't spend too much time really highlighting these individual great performances, because if I did that, these breakdowns would be over 2 hours long. There are moments where I have to edit these down a lot because I like to go into the little details, little nuances furthermore. And plus, I think it's kind of obvious how incredible these performances are in every single episode, but I want to take a moment to break down this scene. I first took notice of Tom Pelphrey when he was in an awful television series by the name of Iron Fist, and he really didn't make much of an impression on me in that particular performance. It wasn't until he came in like a nuclear bomb in season 3 of Ozark as Ben, that's when I saw how incredibly talented he was. I say all that to say this. This scene of him going from crying after knowing Cliff is dead to him switching into the mindset of rage and even more vengeance to kill Jason, to me, that was next level acting. I would go as far to say that I could see that scene being a clip being played when his name is mentioned as a nominee for Best Lead Actor in a limited series. Now, back to the episode. Meanwhile, Perry Mason makes his way toward Erin and talk about terrible timing because Perry just so happens to see Robbie drive past him as the tracker takes him exactly to where Erin is. Now, it doesn't take a genius to connect the dots. Perry has seen the picture of Cliff and Robbie. Now he sees Robbie driving away from the very person he's tracking. He's now found the leak. For Perry, the case of who portrayed the club is now closed. Now, he surprises Erin, reminding her of the clean way out that he offered. This being a reference to how I read the scene in the kitchen in last week's episode, where I know some of you all thought that he was threatening to kill her and the kids. Now, his intentions are much clearer and far more sinister. Now, he grabs Erin, stating that they have to go a different route now, but we see she flees, plunging into the quarry water, and like a psycho shark, Perry dives in after her. We see Erin tries to fight and she screams for help, but the distant music of the other people in the quarry drowns out her cries. As we watch, Perry catches up with her and holds her under the water to silence her. And in a shocking moment, Perry drowns and kills Erin. Now, his immediate reaction suggests that this wasn't his primary intention. It appears he wanted to take her alive and perhaps have Jason or let the Mother Club decide her fate, or even use her maybe to help Jason before Friday's literal deadline. I also want to mention how ironic it is that Erin dies at the place where she used to be happy and be with Billy, and now again it's a place in where she dies. Now I also want to mention before moving on, what exactly did Perry do with Erin's body? We saw him carrying her away, but did he bury her in the woods somewhere, or did he transport her in his trunk to a more discreet location? Either way, this undoubtedly sets up the stage for a major confrontation between Perry and Jason if Jason ever discovers Erin's fate. Now, shifting gears, we get the return of Freddy. Robbie, desperate and ignoring the fact that both Perry and Jason have already spoken with Freddy, he seeks him out. To me, maybe Robbie's thought process is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Now, we watch as Freddy's nephew suggests some different ideas of what they should do next. One of the options being kill Robbie, take the drugs, which in return would start a gang war with them and the Dark Hearts. But we see Freddy, the seasoned OG that he is, wants to play the long game. He instructs his nephew to call Jason, demanding everything since he now holds the man responsible for all the recent chaos. As Freddy welcomes Robbie to the table, and the details of the conversation remain unseen, and we don't see Freddy for the rest of this episode. Now, we've watched Robbie make some incredibly rash and quite frankly stupid decisions throughout this show. But this meeting felt different, and I feel will come back into play either next week or in the finale. I think Robbie may have made some deal that will either save him in the shootout that we see being set up later in this episode, or maybe he set something up that may help his kids out financially when everything's all said and done. Now for the moment many of us have been waiting for. Now last week, I almost gave in and started to wave the white flag, and I had halfway bent the knee to the idea of Kathleen being the leak within the task force. But if you saw my breakdown, I kept one foot firmly in the Tony is the leak camp. Same page, we're all in agreement that Kathleen is the mole, right? Or again, let's play devil's advocate. Is it just a show toying with us? I mean, the call in her office, the look she's given Tom throughout this episode just seems too obvious. She's the leak. Or is she? I'm just still hung up on the fact on when did she take Ray's phone from evidence. The reason I bring that up is the only characters we physically saw with that phone was Tony and Tom when they took it from Ray, and at the start of this episode in the evidence bag Aaliyah was holding. Again, is the show throwing us for the loop, or is it confirming that Kathleen is indeed the leak? The show purposefully didn't definitively say that she's 100% the mole, so there's still a chance that it could be someone else, and you all know my money's still on Tony. And ladies and gentlemen, look what we have here. Now, as Tom and Tony exchange updates over the phone, and once the call ends, we see Tony meeting someone under the bridge, and it's Jason. Meaning that my theory and my prediction from the very beginning of Tony being the mole has come to fruition. Look, I'm not going to pat myself on the back too much because we still got 2 episodes to go, but all I'm saying is Tom and Perry aren't the only detectives in this show. Now it's here we also get clarity on the mysterious phone situation that had me super confused last week. Tony took the phone from the evidence and swished it out before giving it to Jason. Now Tony is visibly upset to learn that the drugs are still missing, but confirms to Jason that Sam is indeed still alive. Now during this exchange, Jason takes a call from Freddy about Robbie, and while that's happening, we see Tony receives a text from Lizzy, maintaining his good guy facade. Now Tony immediately recognizes the danger knowing Tom is closing in on Robbie. He warns Jason to stay away from Robbie to avoid getting caught up with the FBI and losing the $1.5 million worth of drugs. Now let's kind of analyze this scene here, because to me it kind of highlights that this isn't a 50-50 partnership. Tony takes orders from Jason. Now, I hope that we get a better understanding of how this relationship started to begin with, and just how long has Tony been a corrupt cop. It makes me think about the scene at the bar talking about other corrupt cops. So there's so much more to explore with this relationship. And speaking of relationship, I wonder if he really cared for Lizzy, and if those conversations that he had with Tom in the car about religion and being a priest, if all that was real or if it was just part of his act. All right, let's cool off and take a break from all the murdering and betrayals and check in with Aaliyah and Lizzy, whom budding friendship continues to develop. Aaliyah shares a deeply personal story about how she lost her sense of smell due to her abusive ex, who is now working as an HVAC tech in Charlotte. She tells Lizzy that she does check in on him monthly, pretending to be from the DA's office to assure that he isn't abusing anyone else. Now, I said it back when Lizzy froze and helping Tom before getting thrown down the stairs a few episodes back, but I think this is all setting up something between these two characters. Stick with me here with my kind of crazy prediction. Now that Tony is confirmed as the leak, I believe Aaliyah, who is said to be a good shot, will either be tested by having to shoot someone of importance, or most likely saving Lizzy in doing so. Or the other way around, Lizzy will be forced to shoot and kill Tony, perhaps while he's threatening Aaliyah, making a shot she couldn't have dared to make before. Robbie's back at home after meeting with Freddie, not having a clue about Aaron being dead. Jason knows about the meeting, and oh yeah, now Tom's outside his house. Now Tony calls Tom and he's trying to make him not engage because he doesn't want those drugs to be taken in by the FBI, aka 1.5 million worth of drugs being seized. But Tom doesn't listen as he approaches Robbie. Now, I can't think of a one-for-one comparison to my level of anticipation to compare to, but the only thing that's coming to mind right now is the incredible Michael Mann film by the name of Heat, which in that film we had classic, iconic legends in Robert De Niro and Al Pacino finally meeting in the film in the diner scene. Now, obviously, much different situation, but similar in the sense of a policeman chasing a criminal and the two main characters finally meeting. Either way, this is the moment we've all been waiting for from the start of the very first episode, which showed us, and throughout the season, we've been seeing their two paths of the season that have led them to finally coming to this point. Now, Tom plays it safe, introducing himself as an FBI agent, simply looking to speak to Maeve about following up on her father's case, as we see Robbie grab his gun in his back pocket, just in case things go south. Now, Tom makes his way in the house, stalling for time as he awaits Tony's arrival, as he makes up a story about having new evidence in Billy's case. Now, Tom has Robbie go collect something of Billy's for DNA, and just as he gets the text identifying Robbie, Robbie comes up behind Tom and puts a gun against the back of his head. Now, I don't know if this was meant to be intentional, but I couldn't stop laughing during this super tense moment between these two characters. Between Tom making up some nonsense about new technology and DNA and AI, to Robbie making these comments about Tom hiding a gun up his ass, also talking about him faking peeing and it sounded like he was taking a dump, and calling him a baby giraffe, truly had me laughing my ass off. If anything, this just goes to show us that neither one of them are particularly good at what they do. Robbie's a pretty terrible criminal with a heart of gold, and we have Tom, who's just a guy with a heavy heart and just trying to make it back home to his alcohol and his birds. Now, for the next stretch of the episode, the confined space of the car becomes a confessional. Robbie explains his motivation stemming from Jason's actions against his brother. Through their conversation, we gain insight on Tom's marital history with Susan, and more importantly, Robbie's surprisingly deep relationship with faith in God.
I never once felt God in my life. And I think people want to believe there's more than this, because if this is really all there is, then that's too depressing for some people.
Now, remember earlier, Tom was shocked to learn that Sam wasn't hurt and he was just out fishing. And now, after talking to Robbie and what he does later, we're just all signs pointing towards Robbie being a good man who's just made some catastrophically bad choices. And on the other side, I think Robbie could just sense that Tom isn't some hard-nosed agent, but Tom's a resident agent who's also a good guy who used to be a priest. Now, I want to point out that we see Robbie with this duffel bag for the rest of the episode, and we're assuming that the drugs are inside. But Robbie makes a joke to Tom that the bag is full of basketballs. Now, the drugs could definitely be inside, but like I said earlier, I think Robbie has a plan and the drugs aren't in the bag and he's using it as leverage for the meeting that he's headed into. Meanwhile, the focus shifts to collateral damage. Maeve is cooperating at the police station and Sam is now safe. As Maeve and Kathleen chat about how this all started, the conversation is interrupted as Kathleen finds out that Tom is now missing. Now, back with Perry, who's now at Donna's, we see that killing Aaron really messed him up both mentally and physically. I can only imagine it has to do with the fact that he just killed the mother and the wife of essentially his son/little brother, making Aaron basically his daughter/sister-in-law. I could be reading it wrong, but I don't think killing comes easy to Perry, and again, I don't think he had intentions on killing her. Now, speak of the devil, Jason calls Perry to fill him in on Robbie and Freddie and the meeting taking place in the evening. And it just so happens Jason also asks him if he's heard from Aaron, and Perry lies as they head out to this meeting. Now, Kathleen has tagged Robbie's car as they go after them. Meanwhile, we see both Sarah and Emily learn of their father's disappearance. Now, if I had any criticism about this episode, it's this scene. As we see Sarah and Emily await to hear the news on their dad, Sarah tells her about her marital issues and being separated from her husband because he cheated on her with a student who she describes as a younger version of herself. As Sarah wants her to not feel the constant pressure of gratitude from what she mentioned in last week's episode. Now look, I get we have to check in on these characters and whatnot, but I didn't feel this particular scene was needed at this point in the episode during all the more important and more compelling moments. The way I would describe how I felt while watching this scene, and again, no disrespect to the acting, and I get what they're doing, but I would describe it as watching a high-speed chase, but the driver in this chase stops at a stop sign to let the ducks cross the road. As I digress, back in the car, Robbie's sighting of a deceased deer prompts a conversation about death and Sam's innocent conversation about saving animals.
You seen people die? Doing last rites and all?
Yes.
Now this conversation leads to the episode's title as a metaphor. Tom describes observing a summer tanager, a bird rarely seen in the area during this season, calling it a vagrant. The bird is a perfect analogy for Robbie, misplaced far from his path and facing a harsh survival scenario. Now, Robbie makes Tom take an exit, which causes Kathleen to lose track of them. Now, it's pretty clear at this point that Robbie sees no other way out of this situation as he's accepted whatever's coming his way, but I do think before whatever happens to him, he's determined to make Jason pay. As we come to a close of this episode, upon arrival at the location, Tom believes that he's about to die, as he pleads to call his children, including sending a message to his son, as he also reveals to Robbie that Susan died. Now, Robbie denies this call, but during this moment, he proves his true character. Instead of killing Tom, he asks him to deliver a message to Maeve. She was innocent and unconnected to all of his crimes committed. Tom gives Robbie his word to make sure that Maeve isn't caught up in all this mess as Robbie lets him go. Now, Robbie has accepted his fate, refusing Tom's final offer to go home, stating that he's lost his path. Again, he lets Tom walk free into the woods where he finds a group of families and calls his daughters to assure he's okay as he's surrounded by chirping birds, which to me was a symbol of him returning to safety. Man, I love seeing Tom and Robbie's interactions in this episode. It was not only brilliant acting between the two, but I couldn't help but to think that maybe in another world or another timeline, Tom and Robbie would have been good friends. Now we end this excellent episode with Robbie at the cabin as Tom now with the rest of the task force and they're headed to the spot where Robbie's car was last pinged. Meanwhile, we see the Dark Hearts have arrived to the cabin. Now, I could be wrong, but is this the same cabin where Billy was murdered, or is that somewhere else completely different? Now, the setup now being that the task force, now suited up and armed, are headed into the hot spot where the meetup is about to happen. Now, you'll notice a little detail, and that's Lizzy, who's behind Tony, is sweating more than the others, indicating that she's extremely nervous, and the question is, will she step up or will she freeze again? Now we see Robbie isn't at the cabin anymore, he's by the water performing the quiet ritual to calm his nerves before the confrontation. But this now carefully planned meeting is instantly compromised. The tables are now fully turned. Tom, now armed, appears near Robbie and yells his name, alluring the approaching dark hearts. This clearly wasn't a part of Robbie's plans. As he points his gun at Tom, and Tom yells at Robbie that it's over, and we end the episode left to wonder which one of them will potentially shoot first and set off what I think will be a big shootout for next week's episode. With all that said, wow, what an episode of television. To me, this takes the cake of the best episodes so far this season, and it felt like a perfect penultimate episode, but it's not, because we got 2 episodes left. Now, in most cases of television, the second to last episode will not normally pick up immediately after where things ended. Instead, some shows like to focus heavily on flashbacks. With that said, could next week be filled with flashbacks, for example, of seeing Billy's death, showing us the day Susan died, and maybe focusing more on what's going on with Ethan, while potentially giving us present-day plot in between those flashbacks I just mentioned? Now, if I'm wrong, which I hope I am, I hope we don't get like a heavily focused flashback episode, but if I am wrong and we do pick things up from this final scene, where do we go from here? We know that Sam is now in the custody of the police and we're assuming he's safe, so I would assume that that plot is over, right? Because what else is left for Sam's character to do in the show? As you all know, in the last few weeks, I thought the whole deer theory of him being killed in some way is now thrown out of the window. And also, what do we do with Maeve now? I mean, we do have to see how this potential shootout meeting will turn out, but I would hope Maeve won't be considered an accomplice and she will be able to walk away clean. We also have to see the fallout from Perry killing Aaron, and if Jason finds out, will he want to kill Perry or will he be relieved to know that she was the leak? What about Jason being killed on Friday, which, if my timeline is correct, this particular episode was on a Thursday, meaning that Jason's supposed to die the following day. We also still have Tony being the leak and having to deal with that, and of course, Ethan's case. If my thoughts on the shootout happens, can we anticipate a few main characters dying? If so, I could see one of the members of the task force dying and a couple of the Black Hearts members dying, maybe like a Shane potentially, or maybe Perry, or maybe Tony or Lizzy, or potentially Kathleen. Have more information on Tony being the leak. Now, overall, as I said, this is my favorite episode thus far. The tension between Perry visiting Maeve, Perry killing Aaron, and the back and forth between Tom and Robbie, and the setup at the end, that's what I like to call a good old classic great episode of Sunday night television on HBO. So I think I've said everything I wanted to say, so with that, let's wrap up my breakdown of episode 5 of Task. Now it's your turn to share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you all think about this episode and everything we discussed, from Tony being the mole? Have we seen the last of Sam? And who will live? Who will die during this potentially shootout that's being set up? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Now, if you all have made it to this point in the breakdown, I really appreciate the continued support. I can't thank you all enough. Do me a favor and put in the comments right now for our secret word of the week, and that is #BabyGiraffe. Thank you all for watching or listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do me a favor, hit that like button if you enjoyed this breakdown. And in doing so, as I've said in the last few weeks, there's a new feature on YouTube called the hype button, which allows this video to be spread out to new viewers. Which, speaking of new viewers, do me a favor and hit the share button. Share this breakdown to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show. And last but not least, please consider subscribing to the channel for more task breakdowns and so much more. Now, if you are listening to this in podcast form, I appreciate you. Please like the podcast, leave a review, and subscribe to the podcast as well. Alrighty, y'all. You all are awesome. Stay safe, and I will see you on the next breakdown of episode 6 of Task.